Continuing with the second chapter of the I Am and the Principle of Aseity, in this video, I want to go straight to the Principle of Aseity, which I think is the most important philosophical tenet out there, given that most philosophies end up arriving at this conclusion along with the evidence that I've been speaking about, and is often a very strong theme in these altered states of mind experiences, like in the OBE, Sensogens, DMT. This is the core principle of the experience through the DMT experience, this idea of merging with the world. I found an interesting a term that was given to me when I was discussing this topic. It's been coined by psychologists as mystical psychosis. If you go and Google that, you can find that this is a term coined by psychologists from people who claim of this idea of merging with the all or God or something like that. Of course, in our materialistic, dogmatic society of today, we would term this as a mental illness, but research and evidence is showing that perhaps there's more to this than a mere mental illness. In the previous video, I spoke about how Jesus might have shown some of these patterns in terms of ego dissolution, this idea that we are not only the flesh and we are not ourselves, but we are something much more complex, which is a very strong theme, as I said, in this experience, this outer state of mind experiences. The story of Jesus and the Buddha are very similar. It's this idea of this human trying to overcome his own self, trying to overcome suffering and trying to understand the world and reality at large. And they come up finding their own conclusions, which lead to the same. And at the end of the day, if we go into the apocryphal, if we go into the quote-unquote hidden teachings of Christianity, we can make straight correlations to Eastern philosophies, which are not present in today's Christianity, given that there are a lot of misinterpretations, a lot of mistranslations of these higher themes and higher realities that back then were completely alien. But today, with more evidence, with more understanding of the mechanics of the world, with more data, we are able to grasp more correctly. Saying that Jesus was quote-unquote crazy would be a bit of a bold statement, which on both sides of the argument, it would come with strong feelings about it. The theist side would say, oh, well, why would you blaspheme against Jesus? Why would you say something like that? And people on the atheist side would say, well, of course, if there was someone named Jesus who was saying all these things, of course he was crazy. It's a bit of a strange understanding, but I'm not saying that he was truly crazy. I'm saying he was perceived as crazy because people didn't understand what these realities he was speaking about. And of course, as I've been saying all along, how do we arrive to any sort of quote-unquote truth? Well, we find other clues that lead towards the same direction, and when we overlap everything and most information, whatever goes through the cracks is the closest thing that we have to a truth. So I wouldn't have made an argument about this if I hadn't found anything else in the scriptures. But in fact, we do have a mention of this quote-unquote I am in the Old Testament. And it's not just a mention, it is in fact a cornerstone of the Judaic tradition. So the verse goes like this: God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Exodus 3:14. Now this story comes when Moses was... There's a whole story about the burning bush, where he saw a burning bush, and this was before he freed the people of Israel. And if we think about Moses, he was one of these ascetic figures, perhaps most important in the Old Testament, which supposedly he had contact with this entity, which was quote-unquote God. And another thing about Moses is that he is also reported to have some of these supernatural abilities, like Jesus. There's the story where he parted the Red Sea. There's the story where, with the help of God or by God, he made bread come out from the heavens. It rained all over the fields. It wasn't really bread. It is described as more of a flaky texture thing that was eatable. In any case, there were supernatural abilities attributed to this figure of Moses. Now, if we come to think about it, this is a human just like Jesus who had a strong will, and they were being oppressed by a ruling society, by the Egyptians, and he had the will within himself to quote-unquote free his people. And then he went through an experience, which is like very often in these ascetic figures. With these ascetic figures, they go into isolated places and they have encounters with quote-unquote entities. So this entity, when he felt this urge to take action, supposedly he had this encounter with an entity, and he asked the entity, what am I to tell my people? Who has sent me? And the entity said, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. Now this does not make any sense, just like the Jesus story. Who is this I am? What are you talking about? I am has sent you. This does not make any sense. And this verse is the latest translation. There is no other way to translate these verses. The transliteration in Hebrew, I'm not gonna even try to pronounce it, but it spells just that. It says, I am that I am. I am. I exist. I will cause to be what I will cause to be. Now, this in theology is known as the Principle of Aseity. In terms is the first motor, is the first emanation, the first energy. Now, this is one of the topics that gets a little bit swept under the carpet because it's very hard to grasp and understand. But this is an actual theological concept. As I said, it's quite interesting that this principle, this idea, this concept is the conclusion of many other philosophies out there in the world, and most importantly, it is the conclusion in the modern evidence coming from the research on entheogens and other altered state of mind experiences. Now, the problem with Christianity and the problem with the Judaic tradition, with all these ancient quote-unquote religions, is that they thought that this was an actual entity. This was not the act of being. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the name of God. So the name of God is supposed to be I am? Well, how does that make any sense? It's quite interesting that this entity did not take a persona, did not take I am God Yahve of something. This Yahve is known as the Tetragrammaton, and this is YHWH. The thing that happened is that at that time there was a very delicate situation between the Jewish people and the Roman Empire. And the way that the Jewish people were to their religion, they were very careful with the way they shared the scriptures. So they used the quote-unquote name of God and all their stories and their prophets and all these sacred texts that they had. They used the name of God in a cryptic way. They put the initials of what was told to Moses. So that's where we get the YHWH. They also didn't want the name of God to be used in a wrongful manner. They didn't want it to be used in vain. There was a lot of respect around these topics, naturally. Of course, the Jewish people would create this cult behind this story of the burning bush, and they truly thought that Moses had encountered the God, the ultimate reality, and this higher, this consciousness, this ultimate God. This is why he was so important for them, and they would not use the name of God in vain. So later, when scholars were going into the Old Testament and people going through the Old Testament, they found this Tetragrammaton, and with language evolving, it turned into Yahve, and then Jehovah. And then this is why we think that the God of the Jews is Yahve or Jehovah or whatever name it has evolved into. But in fact, the original name of God was the I Am. And it was not a name, it was the very act of being. It was not a persona, it was not a specific entity, it was the very act of being. To further understand how tragibust this concept has become, we have to look into why is God called Lord. Why do Christians call Jesus, even Jesus is called Lord? Is this master-servant relationship that is attributed to God and humans. Now, the thing is that before this story of the burning bush, because of the prophets and the whole story from the Jews, they used to call God Adonai. I don't have the transliteration. It's ancient Hebrew. I am not going to even attempt to truly go into the etymology of this, but the closest meaning of this word was master or Lord, and this adds the connotation of a master-servant relationship. So this is why we call the Lord. Lord Jesus Christ, save me. Oh, the Lord. Oh, Lord. This idea of God being the Lord is what perhaps led into the Middle Ages evolving into this master-servant relationship where the kings were somehow divine beings or divine emanations touched by the hand of God and led to rule their people. This master-servant relationship is a connotation from the language and from the understanding that the early Jews had from these stories coming from the Old Testament. But in fact, the reality is that there is no such master-servant relationship truly in divinity. What the truth is, and the truth seems to be based on the evidence that I mentioned before, is that this was the I Am, the very act of being. In the next video, I will speak about how the whole message of Jesus seems to relate to this principle of aseity, because this is what I found, that everything goes in hand with what I've been saying about Jesus. And what I will talk about also is what is exactly this principle of aseity and what are the implications truly. I'm gonna go a little bit outside the book and go into the true implications of this principle of aseity, which, as I've said, might be the most important thing to understand. But I want to leave this, I want to end this video with one question or one argument that I've been working on. And as I said, I'm not going to go a lot into the Old Testament in this series. We have in the Old Testament a God who is very narcissistic, a profile, a psychological profile that seems to have a lot of ego and a lot of anger. One of the main arguments from the atheists is to point out this immoral God of the Bible, which he acts like a tyrant, which acts like a very jealous, patriarchal Jewish figure. And I asked to myself, could it be that if Moses came into contact with quote-unquote the I Am, could he have gotten into contact with a higher version of himself? And this is why the God of the Bible seems like a Jewish, angry, patriarchal figure, which talks about war, which talks about the issues that were going at the time, which talks about their culture. Could it be that it was the higher version of Moses? Just like Jesus evolved into a higher version of himself, just like the Buddha evolved into a higher version of himself. This seems to be the case. So there is the possibility that the Christians today are worshipping a higher version of an ancient Jewish man. If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. A rational divine outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it'll help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.